Audio Jungle. Audio Jungle.
This is Dr. Barry in Melbourne. It's 9:15 in the morning on the third day of our autumn, which is, I hate autumn, or I like autumn, but I'd rather the summer. I'd like to introduce Kevin Arnott, which is, will come on in a few seconds, and Kevin is in Arnott, and I think it's 2:15 in the afternoon in Canada. Correct me if I'm wrong. And then we've got Bill Turner in New Zealand, and it's 11:15 in the morning, and we've got a man up in the summer area in Queensland, and that's Mick Holt, and he's in a warmer climate as well. So I'd like to introduce one at a time. We'll go to Kevin Arnott and introduce yourself, Kevin, and say hello to Bill Turner, and we'll go on from there.
Well, hi, Bill. Hi, Mike. Hi, everyone. And it's
Hi.
good to be with all of you. Hi.
Bill, if you'd like to have you got a few questions you'd like to ask Kevin, and we'll probably go on from there.
Barry, you were supposed to send some stuff through to me on him, and
Excuses.
Never got
Here
there,
we
huh?
go now. I did send it to you, and you didn't look at it, mate. And there's no excuse for lack of knowledge and knowledge gaining.
Oh my goodness! Hold on.
Kevin, I'd like to congratulate you on arresting those people, and perhaps as we go along, you'll tell us a bit more about that.
Do you mean the notice that was just sent out the other day?
Yes.
It's a notice of liability, so we haven't quite arrested them yet, although I look forward to doing that with our common law sheriffs. But no, it's a notice of liability offering them an honorable way out if they do certain things. So it's kind of a pre-legal action, but we find, it has a lot of symbolic weight behind it, because it's offering people a contract saying, you have to do the right thing. You've got to restore what you've taken. You've got to stop doing these heinous crimes, right?
Right. So basically, the common law court has been going in England. I did speak to John Smith, who set it up there, and I'm waiting. He promised to send some paperwork to me. It hasn't arrived yet, which is fair enough. It's a long way away from Australia. So the common law court, obviously, and you've had great success in the common law court, so it is the way to go. Is that correct, Kevin?
Works because, the classic case is with Joseph Ratzinger still hiding out in the Vatican 7 years later. They know that a citizen investigation and inquiry or common law court, the verdicts of those courts can be acted on by any court in the world. So anyone can issue an arrest warrant if the people have found this person guilty. And even if most people don't realize their power, people in authority do. And they know the power of the law. They know they've done this stuff wrong. So they're on the defensive in many ways. It gives us a great lever and a great power once we know our rights and our power.
Well, the power is with the people, and Bill's been preaching all about the law for a long time, 20, 30 years. And as I said before, the Romans had many gods, but they settled for one in the end. So there's a lot of people preaching about alternative courts and stuff, but Bill has stuck to the correct path, and I think he's the guru in this part of the world. In fact, there's people from America have contacted me who actually watch Bill Turner. Bill, have you got anything to add to the common law courts? Come on, Bill, come up with some solutions.
Well, I was talking to you yesterday, Barry, and if you remember rightly, you said you don't have sheriffs over there now. And just listening to Kevin, forgot the name. Thank you, Barry. Kevin, what they've done with the sheriffs in New Zealand is they've hidden them in the courts. So
Right.
In America, they're open and visible, and they used to be in Australia too. And I just had a word with Barry last night about going and looking for them in the courts, because that's where ours are hidden. And they have the most powerful role. The bailiff comes under them, and then the registrars are all below that. So you may want to have a look in your court system and inquire about the sheriffs. I'm sure you'll find them, because they have to be there. And if you go back to England in the Robin Hood days, the sheriff of Nottingham was not a nice guy. but they do have to do
Didn't
what
we?
they're told.
Weren't they called Commonwealth Police? I don't think they ever called them sheriffs. I've never heard of a sheriff before in Australia.
Well, the term, my understanding is the term came from shire reeve, like the shire, which was the collection of villages, had a reeve or a headman, and he was responsible for getting all the men in the village to take responsibility. That's where the word posse comes from. Everyone would get together and ensure the peace and, you know, arrest wrongdoers, people who'd caused harm. But you're right about the sheriffs. It's the same way in Canada. Sheriffs are simply officers of the court, and they don't have jurisdiction outside the court. In fact, in America, they're elected, of course, by the community. They have great power. They can appoint juries. They can remove corrupt judges. That's the original meaning of it. It exists still in America because they're locally elected officials accountable to the people, not the government. So that's the power of it, definitely. Yeah.
Well, they do still retain those powers, and they can make arrests, they can seize property and all that sort of stuff. So, yeah, they're still there. They don't like to put their head up or their hand up. You've got to go looking for them, and they will try to remain hidden behind the curtain, but they're there.
I know in Ireland, which is a republic, they actually introduced a sheriff a few years ago, maybe 5 or 6 years ago. It seems like 5 minutes. And that's under the old Sharif laws. I think it's Sharif law, correct? Pronunciation may not be correct. But they actually have sheriffs in Ireland, which under the Republic in Ireland have no place whatsoever. But they do have them. So obviously we have them here and they're hidden under the cupboard. So from now on, Mick and I and everybody else in Australia will go looking for these characters, and they're probably registrars or something else disguised, and then they'll change caps and become something else. Would that be right? Anybody got any questions they want to ask of anybody? Go ahead.
No, well,
Yes,
you're
I
right
do,
about
of Kevin.
Oh, sorry. You're right about that, Barry. They do have, in the case of the registrar, they may have 2 or 3 hats. And sorry, I wasn't in that office at the time, is their usual thing. So you say, okay, we're requesting you to put your sheriff's hat on now.
I spoke to you, but we never actually managed to talk about it. You're appointing sheriffs under the International Common Law Courts of Justice, is that correct?
That's right. Yeah, they have their own sheriff system. When they convene a court, they have their own sheriffs. Yeah, but you could make an application to the tribunal that kind of convened the court, and they can issue you. Yes, absolutely. They've done that in other countries. They did it in Ireland when we tried to arrest the cardinal there, Sean Brady. Yeah, definitely.
It's all in his book here, in Kevin's book, which is only $10. People should buy it. There's 12 steps, and I have been reading it. So the administrator on the particular court case, he appoints from the community after a public meeting, correct me if I'm wrong, that he appoints the sheriffs from that particular court case. Is that correct, Kevin?
The administrator, you mean the magistrate, the judicial, the equivalent of a judge?
Yeah. Whoever is running the court on that particular day from the 12 steps here clearly states that the sheriff is elected by the community on that particular day. Is that correct?
Either can happen. I know that, you see, in the common law court, the judge doesn't have the power they have in like crown courts or whatever. They can't dismiss a jury. They can't rewrite the court record and all the other shenanigans they do. They're just a judicial advisor to the jury and an administrator of the court. So they interpret the law, but they also can, appoint officers to the court. So that's right.
And yeah, that's what we're going to do. A lot of people have asked questions about the PPRS, which we have here in Australia. Do you have that there in Canada as well? And have you got any advice on the PPRS, Kevin?
PPSR, Kevin.
What is that? What is PPRS?
Personal Property Security Register. They do. Canada
probably call it something else. Yeah.
Canada had it first. We were the second one to get the PPSR. They took away the Queen.
Oh, really? Oh.
Yeah. They took away the Queen's Court and replaced it with the PPSR, Personal Property Security Register.
Well, it's all a
Okay,
learning
can you
process
just
today.
explain for those of us who it means?
The Queen's Bench.
Bill?
Bill,
Big pardon?
explain the PPSR, please.
Well, like if you go and purchase a motor vehicle or something like that, and you get finance, then the finance company will put a lien over the title of the car, and it's a registered security over that vehicle. But what we've been doing is putting a registered lien over the person, which is the surname, and because that is the debtor and we are the creditor. So by registering that claim, you show anyone who comes after you, or I mean, the best thing is to notify them beforehand, but any debt collectors or anyone comes after you, you give them a copy of your PPSR registration and they will not proceed.
Yeah, so basically you're actually
The
taking a lien on your own property. Go ahead, Kevin, sorry.
well, they call it the Personal Property Security Act in Canada. It's basically covers all statute in common law provinces, which is all of them except Quebec, which is under the Civil Code. And yeah, so it's a way to exactly what you're saying. They call it something different here, which is why I didn't recognize what you're saying at first.
Okay. Okay.
Okay.
Anybody got any questions for anybody? Kevin, if you got a question for Bill, or Bill vice versa, or Bill, somebody put their hand up and go and ask some questions, and right, I'll ask in a minute.
Well, I'm curious. I know, Mike's talked about this before. Some of the issues that you're engaged in right now that the common law courts could be convened around, or what are the kind of the outstanding issues for you down under?
The outstanding issues, I'll put forward my opinion, and then somebody else can say it. We had an act here in 1986 which removed the Queen. We had one in 73, of course, by Gough Whitlam. He got caught by the last lawful Governor General, and they said this will never happen again. The Labour Party said that. So from 1986, we've been a republic without a referendum and without the knowledge of the people. If anybody else wants to answer that for Kevin, just go ahead.
Yeah, well, basically in 1973, Whitlam took the Queen out of the Constitution by changing the royal styles and titles. He created the Queen of Australia. Now, first of all, he didn't have any authority to do that because only the Queen of England is the actual crown authority under the Constitution. Now, once he did that, every single act, law, legislation, conviction has been unlawful, because without a crown authority, then there is no law. So these people have a big problem now, because as one politician said to me the other day, yes, but we have been doing this for so long now that it's become entrenched. It's not an excuse, because if a law starts out as null and void, then everything after it is not entrenched because it's null and void. So the political parties now face a huge problem, as do the people of Australia as a result. But until we resolve this problem and get back under our Commonwealth of Australia Constitution and Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth, living in a lawless state. It's that simple.
Bill, what's your
Well, it's
opinion?
interesting. Yeah, I found that interesting because one of the arguments being made, and I know from people I've spoken to in England about that, is that Crown law, of course, isn't the only system of law. And in fact, going back to the 17th century, the principle brought in that within the Commons, which wasn't just Parliament, but was the idea of the people assembled, like where the American Revolution got their idea, right? We, the people in assembly, create the government and create all constitutional authority. That because the monarchy was reimposed on England essentially through a military coup by Charles II, that even Crown law since 1660 has been illegitimate because it was imposed over the will of the people who had lawfully deposed the monarchy. So we've used that in Canada to say actually everything that they've done in Canada as being null and void, right? So if you trace things back far enough, you get back to the original question, where is the source of power and authority ultimately, right? So just threw that
Pass
out.
the aspirin, please.
Our source of power, the invested power, comes from the monarchy in England. Whether we like the monarchy or not, it doesn't really matter. Without the monarchy, we have no constitution. Bill, would you like to add anything to that? That was a very good.
I could. At some stage, I guess I'll get people up to the same level. But when a private company, I used to have a private company, Barry, and the first thing I had to do was get articles of association and a constitution, because only companies can have articles of association and constitution. Now, if I've read the American Constitution, and it only applies to the people whose names are at the bottom of that document. No one else. Any constitution, the company directors who are at the bottom of that document are the only ones that the constitution of that company applies to. Now, this crazy notion that the Queen is in charge of us, no, what they did is, and in the song American Pie, they tell you, and while the king was looking down, because you're born face down, so when you're born, while the king was looking down, the jester stole his thorny crown. The courtroom was adjourned, no verdict was returned. But when you understand how they've tricked everyone into thinking that that the system that we take as a government is real, it's not. The Attorney General, and why he gets that name, the Attorney General, is because he holds the power of attorney that we gave him when we registered to vote. We made an election at the age we were eligible to vote. We elected to put in a representative to represent us. Okay, so he is the Crown's, he looks after the Crown, which is us. The Crown, you know, when you're born, they say it's crowning. Okay, so when you're born, up until the age where you make that election, and then from there on, the Attorney General, General being the highest rank, the Attorney General has power of attorney over us. And that's why they call him the Attorney General. He has power of attorney. So everything is done by consent. Everything is a contract. So they have to get you into a contractual with them. And so once they have a contract, they have power of attorney to do anything they want.
So where does this leave us?
Well, there's...
It actually, what you've just explained there explains, sorry, but what you just explained there is why the electoral laws are so important to us. Because by consenting to vote, we've basically given away our lives to them.
Absolutely. All you're doing when you vote is you're changing the board of directors of that company. Don't think for 1 minute.
Kevin wants to say something there. Go ahead, Kevin.
There's a vital piece being left out of all this, and I agree with you, Bill, right to the very end, because you're describing what Hobbes talks about, Thomas Hobbes, in Leviathan. He said he kind of laid out the model of how the feudal system operated. But in Rousseau, in the social contract, he went a step further and he said, yes, everything exists through contracts. You have to enter into covenants with each other. But by doing that, you do not surrender your sovereignty. At any point, you can step out of that because you retain your sovereignty as a freeborn man or woman. So that's the vital piece that America added into that, which is, yes, there's contracts, but we're not bound by them ultimately. We can step out of them and create new contracts and covenants. And that's the power of the model, of the Rousseauian model of the social contract. It puts power ultimately in the hands of all the people. And that's as opposed to the quote representatives who govern over us, right? Which is, again, ultimately a fallacy, I believe. So,
Bill, you disagree?
Okay. I'll come back in here. How is it that your supposed government can go and make treaties all around the world because it's a private company, so they make treaties. Now what you're saying is correct, Kevin. We do have the ability to step out and to become sovereign, but it's a very, I know some people who've done it over here, and it's a very lonely road. You can't get bank accounts, you can't get anything, because they've rendered unto Caesar their bank accounts. And I mean, I did the same. I surrendered my passport, my driver's license, everything back to the government. But then you're left in a situation where you can't hire a car, you can't do a lot of things. So it's not the ideal way to go. The ideal way is by treaty. To be sovereign, you do it by treaty, and by deed, because your deed is your will, and they must act on your will.
My God, it's getting very complicated, all this stuff, deeds and wills, and I think I'll leave my will till I die or something. Who wants to answer that one? Have you got any comment on that, Kevin? Because this is highbrow stuff for you, between you two guys. Go for it.
No, I'm learning a lot here. This is great. Especially that bit about birthing equals crowning. I love it. I hadn't even, the power of language and words is quite amazing. The hidden things we don't even realize are in there. My reading of this is that we're not ever given sovereignty, we're born with it.
Yes.
And it's a matter of asserting it again. And how we do that, there's different ways of doing that. And I think that's the thing, when people talk about the common law, it's like touching the elephant from different directions. We're coming at this from different directions, but ultimately we're talking about the same thing, which is self-governance and how we enshrine that, really.
Yeah, well, I mean, if you do everything by treaty, which is what your company that's running Canada and Australia and New Zealand, those companies, and they're all registered on the Securities Exchange Commission. They don't hide anything. They do their annual returns. You can go in and see how much they're returning. But, just furthering on from the crown there, Kevin, after you've been born, where do they wheel you off to?
Ward.
Yeah.
The ward.
The ward, yeah.
And you become a ward of the state.
Exactly, yep.
Okay, but delivery, when they deliver you,
yeah.
if you look up delivery, that's changing property from one person to another. I mean, the whole thing.
Got it. Yep.
The whole thing is described in that where you're being born. The whole thing's there.
Yeah, me. What a can of worms. And actually, we had a meeting, the Advance Australia meeting here on the Sunshine Coast on Sunday, and it devolved into quite an interesting discussion because somebody asked, well, where is the ultimate goal? And the ultimate goal is to free the people to become sovereign again and regain their sovereignty, because unless we do that,
agreed,
we remain slaves of the system. And how do we do that? Well, first of all, we do have not only our sovereignty inbuilt when we're born, but we also have rights and freedoms guaranteed to us by the Magna Carta, by the English Bill of Rights, and ultimately by the Constitution and the laws underneath that Constitution. But, our Australian government has been very, very good at hiding all this information from the people. I mean, I was probably one of the last generation of Australians to get an education that helped me understand all of this. But then they changed the education system, dumbed everything down, took teaching of the Constitution and politics out of the curriculum. And now I talk to people who, they're in their 30s, 40s, 50s. They don't have a clue that we even have a Constitution. And there is the big problem. So
we don't. What's the first three letters of that word?
Con.
I'm trying to tell you.
I realise that.
Only companies have a constitution. You've been conned.
Yeah.
We've got a flag over here and it's got two crosses on it. They double crossed them. I mean, you've just got to understand how these people are very clever.
Well, what about the Eureka flag then? We've got a cross and 4 stars on there. I don't know what that means, but the fact is, you know, we do have these laws under the Constitution, and we need to get back to that first. Yeah, and once we get back to that, then it will be up to the people to decide what they want to do, which is why my my website is called CIR now, Citizens Initiated Referendums. Only we, the people, have the right to initiate referendums, but the Constitution put the power to initiate a referendum into the hands of the politicians sitting in Parliament. Well, that hasn't worked, has it? We've had 44 referendums, and only that's in over 120 years, and only 8 have been passed by the people. The rest have all failed because the politicians have tried to con us using referendums to give them more power. Well, the Australian people won't do that, and they are not stupid. So
You say,
well, I don't say they're stupid. I say that they're ignorant
Not
because they,
stupid.
no, they're just ignorant because they haven't learned what their rights and freedoms are, and they're inbuilt. We're born with these. It's in our DNA. Wouldn't you agree, Kevin?
Hello,
Well,
Kevin.
absolutely. That's kind of a basic principle. Yeah.
but unless you know your rights, Mike, unless
I
you
do.
know those rights.
Not a lot of people do.
Yeah, but
Yeah.
what you got to remember is we're responsible for all these acts of 1986 and 1973. If anybody tried to tell me, and perhaps you, and I won't mention anybody else because I don't know what their opinion is, but we wouldn't believe it. So the people now, which we call in a coma or asleep or the walking dead, we're in the same position when all this happened. So it's all down to us. How do we wake up the people who are in the position now that we were in and we did nothing? So we're to blame.
You
We are
have
to
to get a
blame.
girl
Well, you
with
said
blonde hair and big boobs, and that's how you wake up the people.
I'm going to have to.
Can I
Well,
put
that's
you-
certainly one way.
Well, what I was actually working
Well,
on
Well,
this
that's one way to do
morning,
it.
She's Australian.
yeah, this
Well,
morning,
I'm
and
gonna-
I'm still designing
Yeah.
like a business-sized card, which has our information on it on the front, and on the back I'm going to put three things, and I'm going to create about 12 of these things that people can put on the back of the card, and I'm going to be asking everybody in Advance Australia to print up at Vistaprint their own cards, so that when they're going around and they're talking to people, they just hand people this card, and on the back it will say something like, in 1973, Whitlam took the Queen out of the Constitution equals high treason. And then we put something else underneath that. The government stole the water. And, you know, things like this, topics of discussion that will get people thinking. Because once you start getting people thinking, they will start asking questions and get educated.
It may be better to ask the question, does a private company have a constitution? Yes, they do. For the people to have a constitution, you have to have 75% of the population agree to it.
Which
You
is what
will never
happened.
get 75% of the population to agree to a constitution, but
I beg
you
to
will
differ.
get 75% of a company to agree to the constitution of their company. So what Harold Holt did was not high treason. He was doing it for his own company.
Well, I beg to differ, because in the 1890s, I think it was, a vast majority of the Australian people did vote for a constitution. That's why Australia has one. And therefore, that constitution is binding on their heirs and successors.
Well, you need to ask the question.
Yes.
Because if you can't initiate a referendum, I'm going to tell you different.
Well, yes, that's true. We allowed the founding fathers to make a very basic mistake there by giving the power to the Parliament to initiate a referendum. That was the biggest mistake they ever made.
You should ask the founding mothers.
They were too busy giving birth.
Yes,
In
Yeah,
Canada,
it's
you
always
don't
come around
have
to
a...
sex.
Kevin, you don't have a constitution in Canada, so it's a bit different for you guys. How do you resolve these situations?
We don't have a constitution. We have an act of parliament that can be revoked at any point. It's not a binding constitution at all. So.
Right. Now, reading your book, you are constantly talking about creating a Canadian republic. Now, what I've read in your book so far, and I'm still ploughing through it because it's so interesting, I have to stop and think quite often. But your republic would be of the people, by the people, for the people. So it would be basically like the American republic. Is that correct?
Irish republic as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like I said, a Rousseauian model of you could call it direct democracy.
Right.
Of self-governance. The real emphasis, well, one of the reasons is like Australia, Canada is vast, and people have to have effective regional and local self-governance because, you know, it's the only practical way for a democracy to work on the ground, right?
Right. Now, you've read my Advanced Australia website and the 5 points, have you?
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Yes.
What do you think of point 3, which is where I suggest rearranging the electoral system to create regional governments rather than state governments?
Absolutely. The more local, the more people can have power directly in their own hands, the smaller it can be. That's how you have effective, you know, freedom on the ground. And that's proven in practice all the time. Yep.
Yeah, that was the plan here in Australia, to get rid of the state governments and make the local councils, which they try to make local part of the local government and the constitution, of course. Mm-hmm. And that failed. So now you'll find the state parliaments are actually getting rid of the councils because they're a threat to them. So I think we'll stick under our constitution, which was We the People, which of course again in syntax grammar we could find faults on that, but we have what we have, and we were very lucky that we do have a written constitution, and I think it does save us a lot. And Brian Shaw is probably one of the greatest experts on the constitution here. There's quite a few, Wayne Glue, and there's a few other people around here that are really good at it. But we're in a situation here where the maritime courts are just using the people, laughing at them, and this has got to change. And Bill Turner's probably the only one that can help people in relation to these ships and these foreign vessels in dry dock. So if anybody's got okay, it's open board. Somebody asked, anybody got any questions?
Yeah, I actually wanted to make this point before when I was talking about when Whitlam took the Queen out of the Constitution. He also instituted Roman civil law rather than common law, because before that Australia actually was governed by common law.
That happened in 1917 when there was all courts were run on a parallel system, common law and maritime law, but in Australia removed that parallel system in 1917. I think England was 1875, and I'm not too sure America up to the Act of 1971. I think 1871 when the USA became a corporation. So I think that's when it happened. But it was definitely 1917 here in Australia.
That early, I didn't realise that. Good to know.
Oh, well, we're all learning. That's what we're here for. We're learning little bits from everybody, and we're passing that on to the people who are out there who really, really want to know. Yes. So everything we say, we're helping people. Nobody here is getting paid. If there's anybody put their hand up, and I want to share the pie, but there is no pie, so it's probably salty anyway.
Well, I'll send you the bill anyway. Bill, so what are you doing in New Zealand these days with regards to the law and Parliament?
Well, the only thing that I have to do with Parliament is when I send them a letter to tell them that they have no jurisdiction or anything over me. And I think a lot of people are going about it the wrong way, in that if you notice people that you have these rights and you notice them, look, I know of a couple of people here who are actually in control of their Treasury direct account. I just spoke with one this morning, and she did it differently to how the other one did it, in that she put an order into the judge. She went to a tenancy tribunal hearing and put her order in through there. Now, tenancy tribunal is a common law court. Unlike what you say, they took away your common law courts. They didn't. They just hid them. The same as the small claims tribunal. That is a common law court. If you used to watch that American program, Judge Judy, was it? Judge
Yep.
Judy?
Yes.
That's your common law courts, okay? You've just got to look a bit further. They hide things away.
Yeah. They
Kevin,
do.
what's your opinion on that one? That's a new one to me, actually. I love Judge Judy.
I never watch her much. I don't watch TV much, but I don't know. It's kind of like I find the biggest problem is people don't realize they don't believe in themselves. They don't think I can do this, right?
Yeah.
They're always looking to the expert or to some authority to give the green light. You see that in Canada all the time. You don't see it as much in America, but it's I find one of the big, when you talked earlier about what we do about it, when you try to set that example and provide leadership on that, people always tend to hold back and say, let's see if this guy gets hammered, and then maybe I'll put my foot in the water, right? But that's part of the difficulty in leading on this stuff, right? It's the people's own lack of belief in themselves, right?
Yeah, it's the tall poppy syndrome in Australia.
And fear, as Bill said, fear is the master, and we see that with COVID-19, that deadly flu that's floating around the country. The Pope's got it, but he doesn't. Obviously, he hasn't got COVID-19. He's got the flu, so he's very lucky. It's fear. People live, and we're being controlled by fear, by religion, going to heaven or you go to hell. Everybody wants to go up to the heaven. They don't like warm climates. That's why we don't go to Queensland up there too often. And
We're very healthy up here, my friend.
no, it's a fear
Actually,
factor.
you bring up a good point there, mate, because
Anyway,
I was reading this article this morning and
Go ahead,
it's a political magazine from Florida. And this doctor was saying that it's not actually the flu that kills you. It's the body's immune reaction to the flu that will kill you. And it only affects certain individuals. And, you know, they're talking about a big pandemic. And I notice on TV too, they're putting on a lot of these TV shows right now, the movies of all these pandemics and everything, trying to instill that fear in. And there's nothing to fear. People die of flu every year, and they don't call it a pandemic, but it's done the Americans a great deal of good having the Chinese get all this coronavirus, because
It could be a little bit of hearsay as well, but you know, if China, look, good on China if they want to do it. They're paying the penalty, but I got some friends in China, well, one in particular I had a chat to. They're actually all working there in the factories as well, so they're wearing their masks, of course. So what you see is a lot of stuff you see is done by actors. So it's definitely something going on, and there's an agenda there somewhere, like all the agendas we have. So I don't think
Big Pharma want more
I don't wanna
big bucks.
yeah, I won't get involved in that, because basically you're playing tennis with the big guys, and they got bigger rackets.
Okay, I've stopped drinking Corona because I don't want to catch it. But could an underlying reason? I was speaking to a guy yesterday, and they don't do anything lightly. These things are planned years and years in advance, and the global reset has been put off and put off and put off. Now, a friend of mine was talking to a broker in London, and he said the markets are crashing like you wouldn't believe. And he said, you know, everyone is selling. They are just so terrified. Could this be the start of the global reset?
Oh yeah.
yeah, well, this all
Well, have you
ties
seen
in.
that for 15 years?
Yeah, I keep talking about it to my wife, and she just laughs at me and says, "You've been saying that for ages. Where is it?" But you know, I do believe it's coming.
Yeah, I didn't say it was. I said, could this be?
Mm.
Asked
Well, you know, these guys that are running the world, these banksters, you know, they think they have all the power and they can do whatever they darn well like, but they're dealing with human beings who are, we're a cantankerous lot. We're also very unpredictable. And no matter how much they try to manipulate us, there's always people who are wide awake, who are warning others. We're like the Paul Revere's of the modern world.
Well, this has gone on for a long, long time. England had the War of the Roses, so you look at history, there's always been them and us, and we're us, and we're up against them. So
Don't
unless
forget the potato famine, Barry.
the potato famine, well, that's
Yeah.
amazing. The potato famine, you see, it spread all over Ireland.
Deliberate.
Yeah, deliberate. Of course it did, and of course we all know that it might affect a few paddocks around the place, but they did it to get rid of the tenant farmers. Every tenant had an acre of land, and they grew their potatoes and everything else on there, and they survived on it. So that the big guys wanted all that land back off them. So the one way to get rid of them was to spread a disease with the potatoes. So they went hungry, and of course about 4 million people went to America and to Australia.
Yeah, my great grandfather came over. His entire family died on a coffin ship on the way over. You know, so close to home.
Yeah. Well, Dr. Barry, I'm going to wind things up here, guys. I'd like to thank Kevin Arnott in Canada, Mick Holt up in Queensland, and of course Bill Turner over there in New Zealand at the edge of the world. Thank you for popping on, and I hope the people out there watching this get a lot of information from it. We will edit some of the stuff that I wouldn't want to hear, nor would you. Anyway, thanks for watching. London signing off. Goodbye for now.
Hey, Bill.